Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We're going to learn the Maimer of Shabbos Chanukah, Tafshin Memhei. 40 years ago, Shabbos Pashas Miketz, which this year was this past Shabbos. That year, there were actually two Shabbos from Chanukah. The Rebbe Farbrengen on the second Shabbos and said this Maimer. It's based on the Pasuk Rani V'Simchi, which is the Haftarah of Shabbos Chanukah. It's interesting to note that if indeed we're not mistaken here, because it says Zois Chanukah here at the top, if it was Zois Chanukah, the Haftarah would have been a different Haftarah that we read when there's two Chanukahs. But nevertheless, this is the primary Haftarah that you always read every Chanukah on Shabbos. And it's, of course, from Zechariah. And we'll go straight into it, even though there are a lot of classic things here which are discussed as is usual. And of course, the Maimer will give us inspiration and strength in our appreciation for Chanukah, its lessons and its instructions, and of course, inspirations in a way that hasn't been here yet, because it's 40 years. Roni v'simchi bas Tzion, rejoice and be happy, daughter of Zion. We know the Hasidic discourses of our Rabbeim, starting with Torah Or of the Alter Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman, the founder of Chabad. In the Torah Or, there are two discourses that begin with this verse, with two different explanations. And in addition to that, and in the Mamorim of the Mittler Rebbe, Rabbi Shneur Zalman's son, Rabbi Dober, and the Tzemach Tzedek, his grandson, Rabbi Menachem Mendel, the third Rebbe, and the subsequent Rebbes that followed. As is referenced in the new editions of the Torah Or, which was really published a little bit before this Maimer, and the Rebbe was very happy when many references were brought to help expound and learn Chassidus and cross-reference, etc. So, the Rebbe mentions it here in the Maimer. There are two things that we can specifically learn from this verse. Number one, we have to understand, why does it say two terms of happiness and rejoicing? Roni v'simchi. Beis ma'u tamatayr bas tzion davka v'lo tzion. What is the reason that the verse says the adjective to describe the Jewish people as the daughter of Zion specifically, and not Zion itself? So regarding the two terms of happiness, to rejoice and be happy, the Mamorim bring that which is explained in the Zohar. So in the evening there's the rejoicing, which also has a connotation of more of praise, coming together with enthusiasm and happiness in the morning. There are two types of there are more than two types, but these are the two types that are discussed here, Rina and Simcha, two types of joy. But again, so we'll get to that. But in regarding the adjective of the daughter of Zion specifically, so the Mamorim bring an interesting parable that the Medrash brings. There was a king, etc., and he used the various terms of endearment for the special woman in his life. And we have relationships with different people, so we'll see from this Medrash what it's talking about. It says, and he wanted to have all the aspects of this type of love and feelings of affection and endearment for this person. So he said he didn't move from he wasn't able to be properly holding her dear till he called her my daughter, because there's a certain relationship that a person has with their daughter. It's a relationship of caring and nourishing, etc., etc. Support. Then there's he wasn't able to fulfill this until he called her my sister, because the sister is more on an equal playing field, but there's a certain you're equals, and nevertheless there is that love. And then he again didn't cease to endear her until he called her my mother. Now mother is the one who we owe everything to, and that brings about a great love and appreciation. Even though daughter is the first one, because it's really the least, it's the one who's most dependent, so to speak. So even though daughter is lower down in the totem pole, so to speak, than my sister, the aim and the mother, kepashta sa'inyan, mikol mokim, as it simply is that way. Nevertheless, but nevertheless, the description by which we are called for in the future to come, when Mashiach comes, is specifically daughter. Like it says, rejoice and be happy, the daughter of Zion. Because here in this verse, this is a reference to Bas, the daughter, which is even higher than sister and mother. By the way, the fourth one is, of course, one's mate, and that's the fourth relationship, which is not mentioned here specifically at this part of the Maimer. And even more so, this level of daughter, which is lower than sister and mother, will be elevated in the future to come when Mashiach comes in a greater fashion. So even now it has an advantage over the others, and then it will be elevated much more. So it will be daughter which is higher than my sister and my mother, so to speak. And according to the explanation in Tanya, which says that when it explains the passage of the Talmud that says the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. So the Tanya explains that. What does that mean? That the reward is that you have another mitzvah? That's one explanation. But the Tanya says, from its reward, you could also understand the makeup of the mitzvah. So something that has like a great reward also illustrates how important the mitzvah may be, or the makeup of what the mitzvah is. So this would show us that even though now daughter is lower than sister and mother, but nevertheless it's already, in a certain sense, like I said earlier, it has an advantage. It's even higher. It's already now, in a certain sense, higher than sister and mother. But in a revealed sense, and in an inner sense, in a true, utmost, fullest sense, that'll only happen in the future to come when Mashiach comes. So to understand all this, we have to talk about what are these levels that we are referring to. Biti, achesi, imi, ubastzin dlosid. My daughter, my sister, my mother, and the daughter of Zion of the future to come, Mashiach comes. What does all this mean? And especially, like we like to say, in dollars and cents, in what it means to us in our service of God, and how a person serves God. Just like when we study Torah, and we say there's differences, and sometimes it's just small nuances. You have to know, like what. So what does it matter? We say what will be its practical application in a certain way of how you have to fulfill a certain law. What will the difference be? If you say it's this way, then the outcome will be this. That's called the nafka mina, what will come out from it. actually so in the halacha. B'lashon hashas my benau. The Talmud sometimes says, what's the difference between these two things? Like ultimately, and you have to talk about what is a practical application of a difference. So we can understand them. If we understand what this means in the service of how we serve God, then we can understand the difference between daughter, sister, mother, and what they really are. In things of Chassidus too, just like in Halacha. So here's what it's all about. The common denominator is that they're all female terminology, b'chinas makabel, which in that sense, the female is the recipient. And in some of the discourses, it explains that these four levels of the Medrash are also corresponding to the four levels that are enumerated in the verse, which also in the Song of Songs, my sister, my beloved, my mate, my dove, my complete one, my full one. The dove is, of course, a bird that's monogamous, and that's what the verse they're speaking about. Again, the relationship between God and the Jewish people. So again, sister and mate and dove, the complete one. Shagam heim b'lashon nekeva. All those are also in the female tense. B'chinas makabel, which is a recipient. The zehu gam sharash tev shalahem yiras. And if you take these four terms, their acronym is the word yiras, which means the fear of. Even, although it's not in the same order, you have to rearrange the order of the wording. Kimvur b'kam mekemus, as it's explained in several places. The yira b'chlal b'chinas nukva. The idea of fear is when we compare things. So ahava is considered the masculine emotion, the love, the pursuit, so to speak, and fear is more of the receptacle, the recipient. So that's the female emotion, and everyone, male and female, has both. A little bit akin to how scientifically everyone has estrogen and testosterone, so to speak. So, like it's known, the male is the one who purveys, is the purveyor, and that's the idea of kindness and love. And the female is the recipient, the level of strength and severity and fear. Now, we'll talk about soon what fear means here. The and the tough comes at the end, and it happens to be in the end of the verse also, the letter tough of yiras, the fear of, betuf lebesayf, moira loshen nekeva, which also illustrates grammatically anything that has a tough at the end is, well, there's always an exception to every rule, but is primarily female. Elishabini is a gufa yesh kama dargas. In this also there are several levels, and here they are again. Biti achesi imi bastzion, my daughter, my sister, my mother, the daughter of Zion. And I'm going to mention it here, and it comes up a little bit later. But the idea of there's, in a scale of how we relate to God, the primary tools, as is explained in the Chassidus, is fear and love. And within fear itself, and we're going to talk about it, but I'd like to explain it first here. Fear is the lowest level. It's called yirat haTorah. Now, if we would say the next level is ahava, the lowest level of love. Yira and ahava. So fear means that you have a relationship with God because it's the right thing to do. We don't want, what will be if we're not proper and whatever. It may be fear of punishment, a very lower type of fear. Love also because he's nice to you and whatever it is. But then the next two things are the upper level with a much deeper meaning of love, of understanding and pursuing the knowledge of what God is and the makeup of God, etc., which brings about a great love and enthusiasm, and a fear which is more of an awe, that we're the appreciation of being part of this. Now, we start, it goes fear, love, and if I would ask you what's going to be the next thing after fear and love of the lower realm, then you'll say there has to be fear and love of the upper realm. But that's not the way it works. It goes fear, the lower sense of fear, the lower level of love, the higher level of love is what's next. Then the higher level of fear. That's the highest thing is Yira Ilah, which is the highest thing because it's an awe of proper understanding of the makeup of God and recognition that we're part of that. So that's a very awesome thing. Now, the Rebbe, let's continue. So the idea of daughter, a daughter needs everything for her upbringing and her nourishment and all of that. So that is she's a recipient. That means that's our fulfillment of the mitzvahs. The idea of fulfilling the mitzvahs in general is that we are a recipient. The mitzvahs themselves are recipient from the Torah. Without the Torah, which is the engine, we don't have any mitzvahs. The Torah tells us the prescription, what has to be done. It prescribes exactly what has to be done. And like it's explained that why is learning considered greater? Because it brings to the deed. And we've discussed this many times. So that also shows us that the deed is in a certain sense greater. But in order to get to the deed, you need to have the learning. So it's a little bit of not a vicious circle, but a happy circle. This it doesn't only mean in the simplest fashion that you need to have the Torah to get to the mitzvah. That through Torah study you know what you have to do. You say to him is there much more. Through studying Torah that we're able to figure out new things in the Torah. Then the mitzvahs also have something new and novel in the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. Now the Rebbe says here a bit parenthetically that that's the whole idea of the 7 mitzvahs that the rabbis introduced, called the rabbinic mitzvahs. They were brought about in a new sense through they're called scribes, but it's also the rabbis that study the Torah and expounded on the Torah. When they added the 7 mitzvahs D'Rabbanan, then they also then added something in general in the Torah. So for instance, now we're in Chanukah. Chanukah is one of the 7 mitzvahs D'Rabbanan. But Chanukah was there in general to strengthen all of the Torah. And the Rebbe is going to say that too, that all these mitzvahs are connected with the mitzvahs in general. Like it explains in Tanya, in the Holy Epistle, that the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah with the 7 mitzvahs of the rabbis, that equals 620. 620 is the numerical value of the word keser, which means crown. And we move on. Through the adding of the 7 mitzvahs that the rabbis added, the 613 mitzvahs get their fulfillment and their completion. They are the idea of the crown. Even though they're included, the mitzvahs D'Rabbanan, the rabbinically introduced mitzvahs, are included in the mitzvahs of the Torah. First, in the simplest way, the Rebbe says here, why could the rabbis introduce something? The Torah says one of the fundamental principles of the Torah is that you can't add and you can't take away. So how did the rabbis then give us 7 mitzvahs? As explained in Tanya, like the Rambam wrote, all of the 7 mitzvahs of the rabbis, they are founded and rooted in the positive mitzvahs or the negative mitzvahs, and they are to help fulfill the mitzvahs. So let's take the mitzvah of Eruv. There's various types of an Eruv to help us cook for Shabbos when it's Yom Tov. So we make an eruv that we cooked already some of the food before, so that it's already mixed in with the food that we are going to cook, that you have to have, and some of it is like leftover, whatever it is, or to show that either a domain belonging to private individuals, when it's encircled, you could carry there because it's part of it, it increases the domain, but it's all rooted in the original mitzvah. Similarly to, let's say, hand washing. Hand washing was already important to do, and it's to remember and to increase the idea of purity, how it was when the temple was standing, and how the priest had to wash the hands properly before eating teruma and other things, etc. So, the mitzvahs, the Rabbanon, are also already like tacked on to the Torah mitzvahs. And that is according to the instruction of the Torah. Like it says, according to the, it says explicitly in Deuteronomy, that according to the teachings that they teach you, that they instruct, don't veer away from that which they tell you. So therefore, there we have the mitzvahs. It's also that Rambam, I think that the Rambam that I was alluding to here is that the Rambam says, we make a bracha, we say, let's say to light the Hanukkah candle, we say, Asher K'Shalom Tzesav, He has sanctified us with His commandments and commanded us to light them and to light the Hanukkah lights. Where did He command us to light Hanukkah lights? Because He commanded us to listen to what the rabbis said. The rabbis didn't increase because they did it to strengthen. This was to commemorate the strengthening of all the mitzvahs that they were fighting for in the Hanukkah story, the Chodesh and Shabbos and Milah, and the circumcision, etc. So that's why we make the blessing. Mitzvahs ner Chanukah, Asher K'Shalom Tzesav Tzivonu, v'heichel Tzivonu Malei Sasor. Like this is what we just said, as the previous Rebbe explains in the Rebbe's Rebbe in his discourses of Chanukah. Now, with that being said, specifically to this, that the rabbis had this navalei and they revealed these 7 mitzvahs. They were able then to add into all of the mitzvahs this idea of the crown, because once they went from 613 to 620, that was a crown for all of the mitzvahs. But nevertheless, the mitzvahs are all bas, the daughter. They're a recipient. They because they are nourished and they are taken care of by the Torah. Bechinas makabel, the recipient. The mitzvahs received from the Torah. And then when we say the daughter of Zion, that refers to the way we serve God in the time of exile. The regarding the description of Zion, the sages taught Chazarno Akol Mikra. It's a very interesting passage in the Jerusalemite Talmud that we went over the whole scripture. We did not. We do not find that the children of Israel, the Israelites, are called with the word Zion, the marker, the one that's called Zion, except with the following verse. And by the way, they didn't have Google. And I place my words in your mouth, and with the shade of my hands I have covered you, to spread forth the heavens and to found the earth, and to say to Zion, you are my nation. That's the only place that we are referred to specifically just with this word Zion. So this verse is the idea of Torah study, because it says, I'm putting my word in your mouth. That's the words of Torah. The kiyum mitzvahs, not only Torah study, but the fulfillment of the mitzvahs. I have covered you with the shade of my hands. So the mitzvahs are performed. And the offerings, lintoya shemayim, to spread forth the firmament of heaven. Shayidei, that's the idea of coming closer to God, so to speak. Through fulfilling these 3 things in their complete fashion, in their fulfillment, Israel is called with the name Zion, the one that's marked, the one that's special and particular. Now, this is specifically, of course, at the time that the temple was standing, because then that's when you have the offerings. But in the time of exile, we're the daughter of Zion, not Zion itself. They're the daughter, that it's the recipient, and even lower than Zion. So in serving God, that's already the lowest level of fear. We mentioned that a little bit earlier, this idea. Let's continue. It's a bit of a long discourse, but nevertheless, like I said earlier, there's a lot of the fundamental things here, so we'll move along. I didn't mention earlier, but I'm using the newer version, which is a little bit rearranged. So this is from Teres Menachem Sefer Moyadim Chanukah, and if you have it in Hisvaduyas, the first edition, it's very similar to this, just written a little bit. The order is a little bit different. Some of the wording is different, but it's, of course, as we've stated previously, the same mimer. What is the sister? That's a Torah study. So sister is like your equal. It's on the same level. Like it's explained in several places that the Israelite who studies Torah, it becomes the sibling of God, the brother and the sister to the Holy One, blessed be He. Now, it doesn't say it here, but we always speak about where the root of Torah is in God's mind. And Israel is really, in that sense, higher than Torah, because the Torah says, speak to the children of Israel. That means Israel was already there. But in the other sense, the will of God is the Torah. So that is, and the children are more passive, so to speak. So there's a siblinghood, so to speak. So in the Sfiris, in the attributes, in the characteristics, the Torah here is the daughter. I'm sorry. We mentioned earlier about mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are like the daughter. That's malchus, because malchus is the lowest sfira. For that matter, it becomes the highest sfira. Actually, when the world started, when everything started, bas, it's like sort of hit the ground running. It starts with malchus, and then continues with there. But malchus is the female, which is the purveyor, which gives birth, so to speak. Also, it's not just the recipient. It's of course the nurturer, the giver, etc. So Bas is the sfira of Malchus, royalty. Shehi b'chinas Makabel, kingdom. The kingdom is the sum of all its subjects, and then it provides for the subjects too. Ub'chinas Achaisi, hainu k'vi shemizalis li yeshava b'keimosa imzo. Achaisi is the sister. Then it's already the way Malchus is an equalized with the 6 male spheres, so to speak, with all the other, with the 6 spheres, chesed, gvura, etc., kindness, severity, which is called Zeir Anpin, the smaller face, which is the male spheres. The inyanimi, the idea of my mother, the next level. Regarding this, it says in the verse, also in Song of Songs, that rejoiced King Solomon in the crown that his mother crowned him. That's a reference to prayer. Generally speaking, excuse me. The idea of self-sacrifice, total dedication, total giving of oneself, and total setting aside one's own ideas and wants for the greater good or for what God wants. So that goes with prayer, like it says in the Shema, and you will love the Lord your God. What is loving God? That is serving God with the heart. That's prayer. With all your heart and all your might. Till total submission, nefesh, self-sacrifice that we encountered the Shemini Esrei at the Amidah, when we have to pray like a servant standing before his master. That's called my mother. Why? Just like the mother gives birth to the son of the daughter. Prayer, if you pray, you come close to God, that is the catalyst for proper service to God the rest of the day and the rest of the time. So prayer then is the mother, so to speak, of subsequent serving God in Torah study and fulfillment of mitzvahs. That's what we pray at the beginning of the day. It's explained in several places, and the sages say specifically that my prayer should be in proximity to my bed, meaning you should pray right after you wake up. Is take immediately in the morning. Then it's possible that you should come to the fullest measure of serving God properly. Like it's explained in the passages of our sages, which is brought as the halachic ruling in the Code of Jewish Law of the Alter Rebbe. Person has to begin serving God with prayer, and afterwards you go from the synagogue to the study hall, then you study Torah. So when we study Torah before prayer, like Chassidus, that's a preparation for prayer. It's already part of prayer, because prayer is to connect to God properly, and in order to connect to God properly, you have to study about God, what God wants, etc. So that's not regular Torah study. Then you come to the Torah study of Torah just in its most generic fashion, learning about one of the trades, the ox for the cow, etc., the ox for the donkey, etc. And after you finish Torah study, you go about your day and do what you have to do for your work, etc., etc. The Kohen Gadol mitzvahs, that's also a reference to mitzvahs. They're also called the way of the land. Because the mitzvahs are performed with physical matters, material things. For instance, the tefillin, the phylacteries, that the straps, and they're made from leather. The whole Torah is compared to tefillin. It has to be written on a physical parchment, which comes from an animal. Tzitzis, sharim z'l'tayig mitzvahs, and the tzitzis that allude to the 613 mitzvahs. Tzitzis v'gematria tov reish, v'ches chutim. We had that today. Someone asked us about it. Tzitzis equals, in its numerical value, 600. And then there are the 8 strands, the 8 strings. V'heik shorim, in the 5 knots. Oil tayak, that equals 613. So the tzitzis, which alludes to the mitzvahs, has to be made how? B'tzemer gashmi, with physical wool. So everything, the world, and working with it is the idea of mitzvahs. So then what is the daughter of Zion? That means the total devotion, the total self-sacrifice. The avodah mesiras nefesh, giving oneself, shalamayla gam avodas tefillah, it's even higher than prayer. Ki mesiras nefesh avodas tefillah inikav b'fnei atzmi. Prayer is also the idea of mesiras nefesh. It is giving of oneself, but it's not its own thing. It's part of prayer. Elahi chelik me'avodas tefillah, masha'enkin b'chinas bastinu in mesiras nefesh b'fnei atzmi. The daughter of Zion, that's the idea of just total devotion, self-sacrifice, not mixed with anything else. And they could be applied to other things, to many things. If I have to come closer to him to say, we need to see this. The Rebbe notes something that the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that just generally speaking, if you just do any mitzvah, it's considered Mesiras Nefesh. You know why? Because you're doing something that it's not that you came up with it, not that you felt like doing it. You're only doing it because God prescribed it. It's not something that you would have done on your own. So that's already Mesiras Nefesh. You came and you set aside what you may have come up with to do what God asked you to do. So that in and of itself is Mesiras Nefesh. Mikol Mokem, Now, Sheis Kater Mitzvahs Tefillah Hu Inyam Mitzvahs Nefesh Mamash Chulu Mikol Makom Inyam Mitzvahs Nefesh B'Zayini B'Goli Kolkach. But that's not in such a revealed way that's Mitzvahs Nefesh, that's self-sacrifice. B'Peil Ha'adam Ha'isik B'Kiyam Mitzvahs Livna Torah B'Veris HaTefillah. And the person is just fulfilling the mitzvahs indeed, studying Torah and praying, but you don't see the self-sacrifice. But here's the level of Mesiras Nefesh. And now, of course, the ultimate of Mesiras Nefesh is, heaven forbid, when somebody gives their life. But there's also Mesiras Nefesh to really work hard and give him so much extra. So that's the daughter of Zion, is a reference to that type of Mesiras Nefesh, which is the highest, the ultimate. And this is also alluded to with the term daughter. Bas tzin, the daughter of Zion, because what is the foundation for having Mesiras Nefesh, for to have self-sacrifice? That's accepting upon yourself the burden, not doing it the way I like to do it, not my way, but the way of God, the way God wants you to do it. And it's called bittul, and that makes one successful. That's what makes someone closer to God. Bechinas makabel, you're a recipient. V'hinei al derech achil kanal ben biti yachaysi v'imi u'bechinas batzin v'avoida yesh negam achilik b'nishmas adam. Now the Rebbe continues this, and he says, just like we have the difference between the idea of daughter, sister, mother, and daughter of Zion, like we said earlier, that this is a reference to mitzvahs, to Torah, to prayer, and to self-sacrifice. There's also a difference within the soul itself of a person. Just like the body is divided up to 248 limbs and 365 sinews. And you know why a person has 248 limbs? Because there are 248 mitzvahs, and God made the person corresponding to those limbs, and corresponding to those mitzvahs, which are the limbs of God, so to speak. V'shasam, it's as Leisa said, the 365 negative is the 365 sinews that a person has. But a stakel by Alma, God looked at the Torah, He created the world. So the way it is in the Torah, that's how He made the person. What came first, the chicken or the egg? That includes the small world, the body of a person. Now, when I say the chicken and the egg, because God came up with everything, so it's all one thing, but it goes in stature and what comes first. We have this difference also in the soul. Now the Rebbe speaks a little bit about the soul, and this is well known. There are 4 levels. The Hines of Medrash. The Medrash says, Medrash says the soul has 5 names. Nefesh, what we would call soul. Ruach is the spirit. Neshama we also call the soul, but it means the breath. Chaya, the life source. Yechida is the fusion, the ultimate, the one and only part. The part that's totally unique. Or Yechida Chaya. Sometimes it goes in another order that Rebbe points out in some of the Kabbalistic sources. And elsewhere it's explained why the order changes sometimes. But the Rebbe doesn't go into it here. In the Zohar, it says this a little differently than this Medrash. And there it says, Nefesh Ruach Neshama. Right? The soul, the spirit, and the breath. Or neshama, and the breath to the breath. The soul for the soul. Then it's only divided into 4, because the 4th is made up of both chaya and yechida, the life source and this uniqueness. Like it's explained elsewhere, that these 3 levels of nefesh, ruach, neshama, soul, spirit, and breath, that's when the soul is clothed in the body. That's the primary source that ambulates it and animates it, etc., and makes it, gives it all of its functionality, etc. The soul for the soul, these 2 higher levels of life source, and the fusion of the uniqueness of with the peace of God. That's what encompasses the soul, which is higher than being clothed in the body. Now these four levels of Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and the fusion of Chai Yechida, these are the same four that we said of the Biti Achoisi Bas, my daughter, Bastian, my daughter, my sister, my mother, and the daughter of Zion. The lowest level there, Bechinas Nefesh, soul. What is that? That's a reference to the action of the person. We spoke about earlier, mitzvahs. Ruach, the spirit, that's the Torah study. The sister, the sibling. Spirit comes with wind, comes with a sound. Torah study is with the voice, sound. Like the rabbis say regarding the verse that it's life to those that bring it out, that bring it forth. What does that mean? It means to bring it, say it out with your mouth. When you say the words of Torah according to all opinions, that's when you can make a blessing of the Torah, when you say the words, not just in your thought, because then it's less action happening. Although the neurons are firing off in your brain, but it's a different thing. And higher than that is the idea of the soul, which is the breath. Like the Zohar says, this the neshama is higher than everything. It's the highest, higher than everything. Elsewhere it says in the Zohar, Isa the neshama, the soul is holy of holies. That's a reference to prayer. It's one of the reasons why when we pray we have to face the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem, and if, let's say, you don't even know which way you are, you don't have a compass, whatever it is, you have to have that in mind at least. Because prayer is Holy of Holies. Total submission, total devotion, total self-sacrifice. Mother. Then what's higher than all of this? That level of the soul that is not enclosed in the body. The level of the fusion of the highest two levels of the soul, the life and the fusion of the uniqueness of God. This Yechida. This is self-sacrifice on its own, when it's on its own plane, this total submission and devotion. It's even higher than the submission and self-sacrifice of prayer. Bechinas Bastian, this is the daughter of Zion. Getting back to that verse, as the Rebbe says, so all four, he compares the four different things in the Medrash, the four levels of the soul, and the four things in this verse of sister, mate, dove, full one, complete one. My sister, my mate, and my dove, that is a reference to the lower three levels of the soul, of Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, which here is Biti, Achoisi, Ve'imi. So Achoisi, it's explicit. Then which one is Biti, you want to know, and which one is Imi in this, so it's hard to tell because the fourth one is Rayosi, which we weren't even talking about. It's an interesting thing to think about. Samosi means a full one, the complete one, the ultimate koyel b'chinas neshama. That's already the highest level. That's the nefesh, the soul, the chai yechida, the fusion of the life source, the fusion of the uniqueness of the soul with God. Bastian in Nefesh, the daughter of Zion, which is the having self-sacrifice on its own. This is what the verse is talking about, to rejoice and be happy, the daughter of Zion. It's talking about when there's time when Mashiach comes. The difference between the happiness of the evening and the rejoicing and happiness of the morning. It's the difference between elevating something from below to above and then drawing down the supernal realms of the holiness down to below. Mashiach comes, we're going to have both. It's going to be fused. It's going to be different than just elevating, getting involved in nitty gritty, and then trying to make that holy, and then but doing this with drawing down the holiness of the supernal realms of godliness into the world. And when Mashiach comes, it'll all be like one thing. Ukemesha Kosov. I'll go amongst you. There are two ways of going. Elevating and drawing down. Like it's explained elsewhere, that in the future to come, Mashiach comes, you'll have both of these advantages. This is what it means when it says the daughter of Zion Shekoel B'chinas Yechida. It's the highest level of the soul, as we mentioned. Ki hachidush lo sidlove hu sheyeh gili b'chinas yechida. When Mashiach comes, then we'll have this revelation of this highest level of the soul that only comes into play, let's say now in Yom Kippur, when you need the most. It's what tells the person, gives them the total perseverance under the greatest duress and threat. That's what comes out. In other words, it's the part that's really sometimes it's referred to a little bit as the Pintel Yid, that quintessential point of godliness that we have. Ki achidish lo sidlove hu sheyeh gili b'chinas yechida u'kamesh kosav hine yaskil avdi yorum. Like it says in Isaiah 52 regarding the time when Mashiach comes, that we'll have this revelation. It says, "Behold, my servant will be very intelligent and very elevated and uplifted, of a government very high. The Koyel Mashiach, the kingdom of that's a reference to Mashiach, our righteous Mashiach, in the time of the redemption to come. Mashiach will be higher than the patriarchs and the three fathers, and even higher than the first person, the Adam Harishon. And it's explained in the Lurianic Kabbalah. It's because Mashiach has this idea of the highest level of the soul. But the advantage of the Yechida Mashiach, which is this total Mesiras Nefesh, is connected also with the level of the daughter, the Bas, which is the action, the deed, Shehu Kabbalah, Shehuin Kabbalah Seil. That's the submission, the acceptance of the burden, of the yoke of heaven. Shezeu Mashakos of Hini Yaskal Avdi Daike. That's why it says that my servant will be so intellectually superb. Specifically, Bechinas Kabbalah Seil the Eved. It doesn't say my prince. Here it says my servant, my slave, because it has the acceptance of the burden of a slave, willing to do whatever has to get done. Bechinas Yira Ilo, the most supernal way of fear, the awe of being part. That's why it says in Isaiah 2 that it says in the Mashiach comes in the crack of the rock, in the crags and the shelving, so to speak, of the big rocks, because of you'll hide in there in these crevices, because of the fear of God. Like it says in Tanya, that it brings another 4 verses that speak of these ideas of the awesomeness of God and what it'll have and what it means. And here the Rebbe references his father, his holy father, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, who expounds upon this. That's what the Rebbe means. These verses those 4 verses are expounded on in the teachings of the Rebbe's father. It's explained earlier in the Maimer, in the beginning. He said that the daughter is going to be higher when Mashiach comes in a revealed sense. But yes, it says in such a strong fashion. Because before the Gula, Geula, before the redemption, daughter is the lowest. That's like a child. But when Mashiach comes, that'll be the highest level, this idea of total acceptance of the burden of having this submission. So that's going to be the whole service when Mashiach comes. And like in the way that the Kabbalah explains this, that the various names of God, which are different amount of letters and different numerical values. The first one is called the name which is Ban, which is 52, and Shem Sag, which has 63 in letters, and which we won't go into this now, but they will be fused with each other. Shalamayla Mishem Ma, both of those are higher than the name Ma, which is 45. Now Ma is a reference. Usually you say Ma is the male one, Ban is the female one, Sag is already the more resulting, etc. And like the verse in Jeremiah says, the Moshiach comes, it'll be that the female will encapsulate the male. So it will encompass the male. So that's a different perspective in this whole idea. Regarding Mashiach comes, it says he will yet be heard in the cities of Judah, the sound of the groom, the sound of the bride. That means the sound of the bride, the voice of the bride will be equal to the voice of the groom. It's a different way than it is before. V'yasedim, he said, the Rebbe says, will be even more so. So the Rebbe is just alluding to this greatness of what will be in a revealed sense when Mashiach comes. We also mentioned the idea of that from the reward of something you could understand what its makeup is. We have to say, so this level of daughter, which is lower than sister and mother, really in its true makeup of what it is, it's the daughter which is higher than sister and mother. Already, even though you can't see it that way. In the outward way of looking at things, the lowest level of fear is known as like it's inferior because it's the lowest. It's like on the lowest level. But in its innermost, it's really connected to the highest level of awe. That's where you have the lower levels of fear. Fear of punishment, fear of whatever it is. Because in essence, it's because of the greatness of what it really represents. And that means when Mashiach comes, then we'll really understand what is behind this. It's well known that all of the levels of fear are connected to each other. Really, ultimately, it's one thing, fear of God. Even though it's on a superficial level in the lowest realm and on the most awesome level in the highest realm, but they're both fear. Like the ruling of the Rambam is, even if one has to be forced to fulfill one of the mitzvahs, when the person is forced and he says finally, okay, well, I'm willing to do it. So you say, how you weren't really willing, you were being forced. Why can you say you're willing? So the Rambam explains that it's a Gili Primus Harotzen, because he really revealed what is his true. What does he really want? He really wants to do the right thing. So even though he was forced, but when he says I want to, he's saying the real truth because he really does want to. But it's just in a deep, deep sense. The Rebbe here doesn't allude to, of course, what that ruling is about. So today's day and age, we would go IYK, YK, right? Because it doesn't say what it is. So that's a revelation of what he really wants. This is the supernal fear, the top part of the soul. Fake it till you make it, right? Because when you do something not for the right reason, but then we say that from doing it like that, you'll finally do it for the right reason. And Chassidus explains that the innermost of doing something for not the right reason is because you really do want to do it. and therefore you're doing it for the right reason. You will end up doing it the right way. That's why we say this verse of rejoice and be happy, the daughter of Zion and the Haftorah, on the Shabbos of Chanukah specifically. This is specifically connected to the days of Chanukah. Chanukah always has a Shabbos, because any 8-day period always has a Shabbos. A minimum of one Shabbos, sometimes two. Chanukah has also these two ends of the spectrum. On the one hand, the mitzvah of the Chanukah lights, the mitzvah is to put it on the entrance of the home, but from the outside, to affect the outside. But then we say, when do you have to light the lights of Chanukah? From when the sun is setting, specifically when it's dark in the world. Until when it speaks about when it's, till when could you light the Chanukah candles, especially when the mitzvah was to light it on the entrance of the home, so there had to still be business going on in the street. So they said the last people who were on the street were called the Talmudoi. The Talmudites, they used to sell twigs that was a type of fuel. We mentioned this in the last Maimer also, that Rebbe mentions it, in the Maimer of Chobanayach that we did earlier. So the whole idea is that these Talmudites, they were the last ones, because they were, you didn't have I guess even now you can't get the delivery of Amazon so late at night, but maybe you could, I don't know. But those are the last ones still peddling things. When they were gone, that's it. That means there was no one left. You couldn't already do the mitzvah. But in a deeper sense, according to Kabbalah, this idea of Talmudoi is the same letters as Moiredes. Moiredes means rebellious, that we have to bring the light. They should be so light that the rebellious ones won't rebel anymore. Like it says in the Kabbalistic texts, the whole idea of the Chanukah lights is to finish off all those that rebel by nature on anything holy. That's the idea of the daughter of Zion, specifically the time of the exile. There's also an advantage of the Chanukah lights over the lights that were in the temple, in the holy temple, in the Beis HaMikdash, because there are 8 Chanukah lights. This temple only had 7 lights. The lights of Chanukah affect an elevation even in the way it was in the candles of the temple. Like the Nachmanides says, the beginning of Parsh Baleischa, the Ma'asha Amru al Neres am Neres Shelcho Godeilosh Mel Shalahem. So Rashi explains that Aaron was told that your service is going to be greater than all the rest of the services. So that your lights, the lights of your candelabra will be greater. When it says that these candles will be eternal forever, in an everlasting sense, and they will correspond to the face, so to speak, of the candelabra, facing the candelabra. The Ramban says, Koyel Neres Chanukah, that's a reference to the lights of Chanukah lights. That the candle lights of Chanukah will never stop being the way we serve. It says that when Mashiach comes, things will be in a different plane. But certain things will stay even then. And that's one of the things. So it says the lights of Chanukah will have to be kindled even after Mashiach comes, like the passage of the sages. All of the festivals will be subservient except for Chanukah and Purim. It doesn't mean that they won't be there, but they'll be in comparison and in relation to the way things are when Mashiach comes. They'll be chopped liver, so to speak. They won't be as great as they are now, because there's an apparent and an open greatness of when Mashiach comes. So yeah,
they're going down, but rather
right. Everything else is going up. Very good. So So therefore, but Chanukah and Purim stay. It's explained elsewhere. In Chassidus, the Rebbe explains it also. This is a little bit like this idea that we said that the Bas Tzin, the way they are now, the daughter, but she'll be elevated much greater when Mashiach comes. This is the idea of rejoice and be happy, the daughter of Zion, that specifically in the future to come, Mashiach comes, will have the revelation of the advantage of what things are, how great it is now in the time of Golos, because everything that we do now, so the greatness that we're going to get when Mashiach comes is commensurate to what we do now, so that what we do now is also great. Not that we want to keep it this way, we want to get it already the reward, the way it is when Mashiach comes. Chanukah, it'll be a revelation of light like the lights of Chanukah, till we get the fulfillment of the promise. The and the glory of God will be revealed, and all flesh will be able to see. With the building of the third holy temple, with the true full redemption through our righteous Mashiach. Happy Chanukah.